Barshens is brought to you by our awesome patrons. Thanks for supporting the channel.
Barshens!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Barshens Podcast. Stuart.
Hello.
Hello. And I are joined by the lovely, who is always in our presence, anyway.
Always around.
Always
yes.
around. Mr. Riyad Barmania.
That's correct.
I pronounced it right. Yes.
It's
I was going to say Bartman.
It's exactly as it's spelled.
Yes.
Barmania. And people are always like, how's it? Is it any kind of Barmania? Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. Barmania.
It's just Barmania.
Awesome.
I mean, there's an interesting story around that. It's way too long. But yeah, people think like it's a made up name. I had people who thought, did you make that up so you'd be kind of cool? Like you're like an alcoholic? I'm like, no, that's just my last name.
The Barmania.
The Barmania. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Could you give yourself a little mini biography if there was a stranger sat here right now that... Who is this Riyad?
This was like a first date.
Yeah.
Okay. So Riyad Barmania. I am a filmmaker, director, writer, and director. I guess a lot of people who listen to this podcast will know me from working with Stuart for the last 6 years. So we did Ashens and the Quest for the Gamechild 6 years ago now, which is pretty unbelievable. So I do documentaries, I do a lot of branded content, online feature films, which we're making another one very soon, which is exciting. Yeah. So that is me in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Yeah. And of course, often behind the camera on Barshens,
Yeah,
but
that's correct.
not that you would know, because obviously you only
Behind the
see
camera.
what's in front of the camera.
No, generally I stay behind the camera. I think there are some people who are made to be in front of the camera, like you two. But I think I'm more comfortable behind the camera,
Face the
except for
camera.
now. And this is more of a chat, right?
Yeah, it's
So-
a bit more relaxed, and I think it's going to be quite movie based. I've got a feeling we're going to go down.
Yeah, I love
stuff
that.
like that.
Yes.
But you're also from Canada, right?
That's correct. Born and raised in Canada.
Yeah.
So I lived there all my life and sort of came over here. Originally about 18 years ago,
Yeah.
but I had some time back in Canada and Australia. As you can tell, I still have my Canadian accent very
Right.
strong. I've kept it. Though when I go back home, you can hear I've picked up a slight British twang.
Well, they say that.
Yeah, my friends, and it's funny. I can hear it when I go back. I can hear just those words you say, for example. But also because I have kids here, so
Yeah.
I can't say, "Do you want some water?" Because they're like, what? What do you mean? So I have to say water. And that doesn't sound right. Yeah. But it sounds really funny coming out of my mouth. Or tomatoes, right? So my daughter says tomatoes. But when I say it, it's always like, would you like some tomatoes?
Not another Shakespearean dinner, father.
Yeah. I always remember the easy way to change to be an American or Canadian accent is to change a T to a D for water, so water.
Yeah, I think there's
like
so many similarities
bottle.
between, particularly the US, whereas if it's like on the border, the northern border with Canada, it sounds pretty similar.
Cool.
Yeah.
Shall we get started with the shout call?
Yes.
Let's
let's
do
play
this
the
thing. Play that funky music, Barry, from the floor. Because the laptop makes too much fan noise.
Oh no, I'm renaming in the file.
Why do we play this live? Because we edit from one point to another anyway.
I know.
just for
I think
timing, I
it
don't
maybe
know.
helps.
Just helps with the flow.
Helps with the
with the flow.
I don't know. It's a good stretch. I feel like I've earned another bite of that massive brownie.
Oh, I've just eaten the whole thing, which is a terrible idea.
Right before you record something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a place around from the YouTube space where we're doing this, and they do a brownie, which is basically the
called
size
the
of
kiosk.
The kiosk,
They're
yeah.
literally called kiosk.
Yeah.
A kiosk of chaos.
But the brownie is literally the size of a brick
Yeah.
that you could build a house with. A house of brownies would be a name of a
Like
series on Netflix.
It's a more wholesome version of House of Cards.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
there's that in front of King's Cross Station. They have that food market. thing.
Whenever you say King's Cross Station, why does it always sound like crustacean? Every
King's
single
Cross-
time. This
Tomato.
massive- every time. This is not going to go away.
And they have these various little expensive foodie stalls. But now every time we come in for shooting, I have to buy one of the chorizo Scotch eggs,
Oh, are they good?
which are amazing.
So
They're
is it-
ludicrously expensive. They're like £3.50.
So it's like
quite big.
still
but-
breadcrumbs with
Yep.
chorizo meat,
Yep, spicy chorizo. Yeah.
and then egg.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Just a
Notice
quail egg.
how I changed my pronunciation from chorizo to chorizo because I heard Barry say it and I thought he's more likely to know.
Oh no,
'cause
I,
he's a chef.
I chuck it all around all over the place.
I feel better.
Barry's not known for his pronunciation.
No, no.
Ah, that is true.
My videos are like, you pronounce flour wrong? I mean, yeah. You know what I mean, the white stuff.
But I love the comments are always like, Barry, this is how you pronounce it, Barry.
Yeah.
You're from Bristol and I'm from Norfolk. It's a
It's
fucking
a
miracle
interesting-
anyone can understand either of us.
But I think we're talking about your accents are both quite soft. nuanced and subtle, right? If you had a proper Brummie accent and Norfolk.
But actually,
Norfolk dialect.
there's some deep Bristol accents as well. I was thinking
Bristol accent, Bristolian. I said Brummie. Yeah.
All right, my lover, would you like to listen to my podcast? Great lush, like that.
Ass fucking podcast, Henter. The Norfolk one is just nope.
Yeah.
Right, I'm just going to get this off my chest. No. I knew
Two
Barry would
hands just
appreciate
ripped
that.
out. Yeah.
Damn it. Too hot. Now, there's a film coming out about Paige, the WWE wrestler.
I've seen the trailer for that.
Steve Merchant.
That's it, yep. And it's set in Norwich. They've filmed scenes in Norwich, which is great because, I mean, we set a film in Norwich and couldn't afford to, so I'm glad somebody's been able to. The fucking accent of Paige and her brother is basically sort of Cornwall Bristolian. So from right the other side of the country. It's just... what?
I remember actually seeing the original documentary on Paige because it was her and her brother.
Yeah.
And they were having tryouts for the WWF or WWE. And I don't. Is she actually playing herself in the film?
No.
Okay.
But I think it's the thing because I think obviously it's made here, but it's they have The Rock. It's probably aimed at an American audience, and English accents are just English accents, right?
Yeah, so it sounds a bit off kilter and slightly country. It doesn't matter to them, but like. God, it wouldn't have hurt you just to have got it right, really, would it?
Yeah. No, but that's the thing. When I moved here, you just realize how many different accents are, Like in my area, there's about 17 different accents, right? Whereas in, say, Canada, the US has a little bit more. It's a bigger, in terms of, they have a Southern and, these kind of accents, but they're not that different generally. Whereas here, you can just get such a difference between different neighborhoods. So
see, to me, it always sounded like there's the Canadian accent. It just gets more extreme, until you end up with
how's
the
it
proper
going,
Ubuntu.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
We have a French Canadian. There's a Newfoundland accent, which is a bit of an Irish brogue to it. Slightly.
So I just assumed it was just my ignorance of not knowing the accents.
No, there's a little bit, but I mean, it's a huge country, right? But there's only 35 million people across the thing. So,
this is true.
but yeah, it's just there's like a city accent. There's maybe a more rural accent, and there's like as I said, there's a bit on the East Coast, a bit of the West Coast, a bit of French Canadian, but not that's probably about 10 accents across the country, whereas you get 10 accents if we step out of this door, right?
Yeah. I do wonder that if, like, an American came over and they were like there's a person from Birmingham, for example, with a very strong accent, and maybe someone from, I don't know, like, where's just a normal vanilla accent? I don't know. I mean,
there isn't one, is there?
Yeah, everyone does have regions, don't they? That's it.
Technically, you've got received pronunciation, which is dying, thank God, because it's so ludicrous. It's just the royal family really use it.
Okay.
It's like when the BBC started, they had a very extreme RPs. Good afternoon, and welcome to the British Broadcasting Corporation. It just sounds so forced and robotic, and you don't trust anything they say.
Very methodical.
Like. You used to have to use RP to be a newsreader over here and stuff, And they started bringing in people who sounded human, and it seemed to work better, funnily enough. Who would have known?
That soft Welsh brogue is quite popular, isn't it? What's the guy's Hughes
Edwards, is it?
Yeah, that's quite popular as well too, in terms of newsreaders and things like that. Yeah,
maybe it's like a trusting tone. Isn't that they put like Geordies in a lot of call centres because they're like, don't worry, pet. I know that wasn't very good, but it's all like, I know we've charged you.
Yes.
Am I going Welsh? I'm going Welsh. Sorry, but they're like, it's different accents how they feel like it can attract different emotions and feels and stuff. So we charged you £2,000 on bank charges, but don't worry.
Yeah,
it's going to be all right. So Riyad, you're from Canada, and I love food. The one thing that I think of food in Canada is poutine.
Yes.
Do you know what poutine is, Stu?
Oh yeah, very much.
Have you ever had
I've had good poutine.
Oh really?
I've had bad poutine as well, Riyad. Yes.
Yeah, poutine is oddly become. It was originally it's a French Canadian dish, right?
Yeah.
So you'd get it in Montreal, but it's just exploded in the last sort of 20 years. Every time I go home, there's a new. Now you can get it on every sort of fast food menu, every restaurant. There's a version of poutine, but it's basically like high-end chips, or as we would call it, fries, and then like a cheese curd, and then usually it's an onion gravy.
Yeah.
Right. So, but then you get all these really bad variations where it's just like cheese and really bad gravy. Yeah. But it's just become. I mean, it's not like a culinary. It's not the height of culinary expertise. It's just chips and gravy and cheese. But there's something quite. It became a thing you'd get maybe if you're out in Montreal and you're drunk and you would go get something. But it's just quite comforting.
Yeah. After a night out, like a few years ago, my mates coming out of a nightclub, you go get chips, cheese and gravy, just sometimes for a laugh. But it's an actual like poutine. I didn't realise. I mean, it's got squeaky cheese, isn't it? Like the curds.
The curds, yeah. So a certain type of curd, certain type of. It has to be cheese curd, but most places maybe can't find it. Right. But it's just now you can get it with Montreal smoked meat and all these types of things, right? So there are. Last time I was in Montreal, about 7 years ago, there was just a restaurant that was just purely poutine in about 20 different versions and things like that.
So what was your bad poutine experience then?
Oh man,
Were you
so
together?
annoying, right?
Yeah. I went up to Norwich to film something. I think it was for the crowdfunding video.
It was, yeah.
And Stuart had told me, oh, there's a place here. Was it a Canadian guy?
Yes, a
They
Canadian
get
guy
cheese
owns it
curd.
and runs it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And like I'd had poutine there before, and it was really good. I remember I actually sent you a picture at the
Yeah.
time, and you were like,
Yeah, it
"My
looks
God,
good."
that looks the part." Yeah, it was so good. I said, "Right, we've got to go there."
Yeah.
So we went there, and the Canadian guy, is still running it because I spoke to him at the bar.
Oh, he was still there then?
Yeah. And but he'd let the whole thing slide completely because he said, "Oh, we can't get the cheese curds at the moment, so we're substituting with mozzarella." You're like, "Oh, that's not quite the same," but all right, you know. But it was absolute rubbish. It was just like a cardboard bowl, basically, full of chips floating in gravy. It was like a gravy soup with just chips floating in it and little lumps of mozzarella.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like a proper, like someone just took a ladle.
Really?
He was on the
Is that
phone
right?
going one.
Yeah.
So it's like you're trying to, you have the fork and you're trying to find it, but it was just like purely, and then obviously the chips get her completely, because you still want them like a bit crispy
Yeah, you want a bit
bits and a
chippy.
bit soft, and and
They were
that's
just totally soggy. So they were literally floating in soup
Really?
of gravy.
Done the mashed potato or something?
and the gravy wasn't very good either. It
No.
wasn't like, it didn't have the body of the gravy you
Yeah.
wanted, kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a bit too watery.
Yeah.
Everything about it was chronically poor.
Yes.
It really was. It was right embarrassment.
Okay.
So then we took Riyad to one of our favourite restaurants, which had also turned really bad.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Wow. So what is your favourite movie being... That's such a broad question to ask you in the world of producing and directing and... I don't know.
I can't. The thing is, like, you can't really say a favorite movie. I could say a few movies.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this in terms of movies. Like, movies that really influenced me is one thing that I grew up with. Like, I'm a kid of like sort of tail end of the 70s and 80s and the 90s are influential movies. But like, Empire Strikes Back was one of the first films that I remember seeing in the cinema that really kind of blew me away. And I think it's the best of the Star Wars films and still kind of holds up. So I remember that. But I also loved Apocalypse Now, which is a very intense film when you're a teenager, and Blade Runner.
Blade Runner, yeah, I've seen that.
So those are the kind of films that
I've not seen Star Wars, but I've seen Blade Runner.
Yeah.
You seen Blade Runner?
Yeah.
With the Harrison Ford one?
Yeah, I've seen that one. Yeah, with Rutger Hauer or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad maybe watched that when I was like, really young. Like,
It's a great
this
film,
scene
that.
where he's like, killing the bloke. Like, that's pushes his eyes, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he pushes his thumbs into the
Yeah.
eyes. Yeah, and then
that boded well.
and then I also grew up with John Hughes films as well too. So like Pretty in Pink and 16 Candles, Breakfast Club.
Okay.
Ferris Bueller's Days Off was a thing when I was growing
man.
up. We'd always quote films, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off was one of that one. So I look at I have like the taste in terms of what I like. It's pretty eclectic. I love like different types of films. I just love that experience of sitting down, and I think films can do different things for you, right? So so it's like those are films that very much influenced me. I think like more recently you talk about, like, so I always have these categories in my head of like my favorite sci-fi, my favorite comedy, my alt, or my favorite recent films and things like that. So like recently Get Out was has been one of my favorite films the last couple of years. It's that kind of that horror film. It was a bit of an inspiration for the short film we did, Another Game. So I watched that in the cinema about 3 times, and then I've watched it at home a couple of times as well too. And every time I watch it, I get something out of it. And I think is it Jordan Peele? It's Jordan Peele, right? The director. It's just like there's I'm so impressed by that film because there's such a confidence in that directing, and he's a sketch guy more, as I know him as a sketch comedy guy, and he delivers this film that's got comedy, but it's not humorous that way. So I just think that's an amazing film that took the genre and just has it working on a different level, because it had all this kind of racial tension that's very much present in the United States narrative now generally. But
it wouldn't surprise me. I've never heard of it.
Not surprised.
Could you like give me a rough summary?
Yeah, so
Like,
it
one
sort of
sentence?
takes the idea. There was I think based on the Sidney Poitier film in the 70s or 60s of like Look Who's Coming to Dinner, which was basically this white woman engaged to a black guy, bringing the family, so it's basically this white beautiful girl bringing her black African American boyfriend back to meet the family for the first time, right? And he's like a bit worried. She's like, it's fine. So basically, so he comes, he's taken home, and then it evolves into this horror film with the family, right?
Because from that top line you told me, I would not see that.
No, but that's the great thing, because it's the classic horror genre, this sort of trope, right? Going into the woods somewhere, but it's like this really ostensibly very well-meaning white family. They're always trying to make him feel comfortable and saying things like, "Oh, I would have voted for Obama," and like that works. But so you have the horror stuff going on, but there's this undercurrent of there's a real it's like they talk about layers. There's other layer because stuff happens. You're like, "Ooh, it's got the horror element, but it's also got the racial underneath tone." So it's really, really good. And it was he got best screenplay, I think, or something like that, an Oscar.
Yeah.
But it was like one of these films that just was word of mouth and just exploded. But one of those films that actually should, like, it's really, and as an independent filmmaker, that's the dream you have, right? Like it's outside of the studios. Yeah. So that was something I saw recently that I thought was really good. And really
the only film I've seen that's taken a sudden twist other than Titanic.
It was physical twist.
It was Dusk Till Dawn. The start of Dusk Till Dawn, how I was thinking, is this some sort of gangster film? And all of a sudden, the zombies just suddenly. I mean, you weren't expecting that, but I mean, that's.
But that was like quite a twist. I remember watching it. It's almost like it's two films.
Yeah,
it's this first bit, and then it goes into this whole, which was great at the time.
Yeah,
it's quite funny. There's no kind of transition. It's like they go into the strip club, and then they're all vampires, right?
Yeah, I was thinking it was kind of like like a gangster film or something at the start. And no idea. And then all of a sudden, there's like human body guitars. It's pretty dark.
It's like just as soon as the clock ticks over a certain point, basically it's just different film now, off we go. And
do you cherry pick inspiration from your movies, like as in obviously Stuart with the Gamechild there's a bit of movie inspiration there? Is there any sort of directors you get inspiration from, or like little things where you're like, I like that?
Absolutely. So the Gamechild, it was quite. We did that purposefully. We have a lot of movie references in there. There's
I think Indiana Jones scene.
Indiana Jones. I mean, that's almost a shot for shot. There's Goonies. There's all these bits, and I think that was like quite intentional. Like we did that because that's kind of our audience. Is quite fun. I mean, the challenge with that is like you can't do it so that you need to have seen the film to get the reference. So the Indiana Jones thing, it shouldn't be that you make the film and you have had to see Indiana Jones to see it, because a lot of people may not have seen it, right? Like younger people particularly. So it needs to stand within the film. So that's always the challenge with the reference. And we'll be doing it with the new film, but like the jokes and the references have to stand on their own, right? Because otherwise so you're sitting there and like it's an inside joke. And that's the one thing we try to do with the film. So that was quite purposeful. But I always look at other films for inspiration. So like we're doing a heist film now. So I'm watching lots of different films.
The amount of heist films we've watched now must be.
You sit and watch them together?
Some of them, yeah.
It's just about, I think it's hard because some people, there is a thing that I don't think there's any original stories out there like to be really inventive. I know some people think like, but everything's been told. So I feel very comfortable looking at something and finding inspiration or getting a tone and feel. But the important things, like Quentin Tarantino's made a career out of it. Like I remember seeing this Hong Kong film and I'm like, wow, this is exactly like Kill Bill. But he's made a career of it. And then the other thing is, as an aside, any film that's ever made within like 7 to 10 years, people aren't going to remember that. Because as an aside, the Goonies reference in Quest for the Gamechild, there's a thing where he plays the piano. Right? And again, it's not quite shot for shot, but the lines are quite similar. And then Linton, our fantastic editor, who's obviously done Barshens but did Gamechild, he didn't know about the Goonies reference, and it was like later he's like, "You mean that's from Goonies?" Like, I thought you just came up by yourself, and you're really inventive. And I'm like, wow. Yes, I did come up by myself. But that's like quite being cynical about it. But you could like just take stuff because people get older and you don't watch, you don't go back and watch films from. So you could basically take stuff out. Yeah. But I kind of look at it and say, I reference or I take inspiration from, and again, like there's like certain structures, like heist films got a real specific
There's
structure.
A template of some kind.
There's a template, and they work, right? So I definitely, particularly when I'm writing a story, I'll think about films I've watched or TV shows or whatever it is, and I'll watch them before I actually sit down to do the treatment and the script.
Okay.
To get through that process, and I feel some people think, oh, it's like ripping off, but I'm not like taking, the Gamechild we did a couple shot for shots, but I'm not like taking that exactly. And also I have to make that reference or that sort of inspiration work within the rest of the film as well too. Otherwise, again, it feels like you have this film and there's just one bit that just doesn't make sense with the rest of it. So I think that's, for me, that's part of, I've just kind of accepted that, I have some original ideas inventive, but I know probably someone's already had that idea.
Yeah, you don't need to fully reinvent the wheel and use inspiration, right? Did we even do the sharticle yet?
No. Let's do a sharticle.
Let's do a sharticle.
I did press the button as well. We led on from the sound.
That's about right. That's Barshens. That's very good. Let's do the music again. Let's do it again. Go on, Barry. Don't change the.
I have to press
They'll edit round it. It'll be fine.
Now it's time for sharticles. You notice how it's leaning over?
sharticle.
Let's not get there. Is that how we got off that?
I've got
don't
to
know,
stop
you just asked
moving
me a
on this
question.
chair. Alec, does this sound like flatulence?
Very much so.
Ah.
Very much.
It's just the chair.
And it
It's
smells
the
like flatulence as well. That's the crazy thing. You wouldn't believe it.
Oh, I'm just going
Damn
to
you,
adjust.
kiosk.
Did you just sharp before a sharp?
It's very meta.
I'm
Very
going
meta.
to stop having the theme tune just move around on the chair.
The ultimate prep. Where's this from?
This is quite amazing. This is from WPTV West Palm Beach News.
Where's West Palm? Is that the Florida? Right?
Yeah, I believe it is.
Palm
Yeah.
Beach, yeah.
It's a bit of a Florida man story, or Florida men are involved.
Why is it always Florida men? Is it just me, or is it normally a Florida nutter running around?
Yeah, it's become like a sort of almost inside joke, but basically a lot of news articles start with Florida man.
Yeah.
does
Naked
so-and-so.
running around the street.
Yeah.
wasn't
Oh
one
yeah,
of them,
that's a joke, right? Who is this Florida man?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Is he a superhero? Yeah. Spilled chicken tenders cause traffic problems.
Ooh, how does that work?
This is my favourite bit, the subtitle. Public urged not to eat them.
Oh no. Oh, what could this be?
You
Could
know,
this
but you can do the
be-
5-second rule if they haven't been down for too long.
Yeah.
Just like a little chicken tender. I enjoy a good
The
chicken
5
tender.
second rule is not a thing. Don't get poisoned. These chicken tenders aren't for pickup. Don't really know what that means. But an Alabama sheriff's office is warning people against eating chicken that tumbled onto a rural highway after a truck wreck. Only in Alabama, surely, would you see a load of spilled chicken on the road that's going off and go,
Smells foul.
fine dining. Oh.
Sorry, chicken bum.
An 18-wheeler crashed on Alabama 35 on Sunday. Motorists began stopping to pick up the food, which authorities say created a traffic hazard. The Cherokee County Emergency Management Agency posted a notice on its Facebook page asking people to quit picking up the chicken. The notice says that food isn't safe to eat after hours on the ground.
Oh my gosh! So was it?
It's quite hot in Alabama as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Cooked chicken, is it? Well, if it's going to be, if it's hot and it's on the road, it could be
It's probably frozen chicken tenders
Yeah, is
that
it
have
just like a-
spilled. So yeah,
big delivery of frozen ones. Yeah.
It doesn't say, actually. And it just
is there any?
really abruptly ends.
There wouldn't be like a lorry load of just chicken that's already cooked, would there? It's got to be frozen. It's got to be
that's
frozen.
it
Yeah.
must have been, yeah.
Yes.
The sheriff's office says a wrecker crew was on the scene Monday cleaning up the mess. A wrecker crew? That's an odd name for a crew who clean things up. It sort of implies
They're
the
just
opposite,
like going to
doesn't
break it up with a big hammer.
Yeah.
It's like
Come on,
smashing
boys,
chicken.
we got some chicken tenders to take care of. It's kind of like
smashing them with a. Yeah.
I do love a
God.
chicken tender. I'll say that's my top.
What is the difference between a chicken tender and a chicken goujon?
I don't know if that's not the same thing, really.
it's two different words. Tender,
Yeah.
goujon. They're different words. That's the
I
difference.
think it could just be a
I
name
see.
twist, isn't it?
Thanks,
yeah.
Riyad.
Okay, yeah. Goujon. Isn't that guy from Mr. Biffo's thing? He's like gone viral.
Goujon John.
Goujon
yeah.
John. He's gone viral, hasn't he?
So that was voiceover. Pete, thank you. I was
Pete,
nearly said
yeah.
Steve. Yes, voiceover
'Cause
Pete.
like,
yeah, they
what the heck?
some gaming guys got him to do stuff because of the sort of very precise delivery he has, and so he was saying sort of gaming memes and things, and it really caught on.
Oh, right.
Biffo used him for the talk he did at the Centre for Computing History.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, brilliant. So got off him who the name of the bloke was and got him to do, what did I call him? Templeton Whitebread.
Okay.
But then Biffo went back and used him again for all the found footage, basically,
Okay.
as the sort of thread through it. So
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
There was a lot of voiceover Pete in found
Okay.
footage. Yeah.
Will he be making a cameo in the next Gamechild? Or
I doubt it, because
Seems like we
he's too
promised cameos
famous
to
now.
everybody. So
So,
Yeah.
I'm slightly worried we're cameoed out now.
yeah.
can I ask what Warwick Davis was like? Presumably you met him as well, Riyad.
Yeah, yeah. So I
like,
worked with
he-
him quite a bit. So the year was 2013. The company I used to work for, and that's how I
The
met Stuart.
best
Called
year.
the best year
Yeah.
of making things. We had a
That
lot
was
of money
amazing.
from YouTube to make a lot,
Oh,
a
awesome.
lot of content. That was, creatively, it was amazing. So we did the film. We did this series called Night in Decoy. We commissioned a bunch of really cool, fun things. So Warwick was the chairman of the channel. We had a YouTube channel called The Multiverse.
Oh, cool.
Which is now private, unfortunately, so you can't watch all the content. But he was the chairman, so we funded a series with him, and so he came to the office a few times. But he was just really great. He was just really supportive. He's like a genuinely nice guy,
Yeah, yeah.
It's so he came and did that one day, where Stuart met him and was.
You said like
cradling
after
him
like
in
an
his
hour
arms.
he was in his arms.
Cradling
Like,
him, yeah.
About 10 minutes, actually.
10 minutes,
yes,
really?
yeah.
And there's that little, he's just really funny in that bit as well too. Like the dialogue was written with him in mind, but and also I think he's really good. He can he just takes the piss out of himself as well too,
Okay.
right? So
Yeah.
it's like, so he was like a genuinely nice guy. And then the other person who's in the film, Robert Llewellyn, who's Crichton from Red Dwarf, who's probably known to the UK audience, but he did Scrap Heap Challenge, and that would have been across crossed over into North America. Again, like Robert Llewellyn's just a genuinely nice guy,
yeah.
and they're really nice to work with. And actually, you know, Rob, he kind of jokes about his acting ability, but he really, like, you know, we try to work on this thing where like the professor is like kind of the father figure to Stuart, and the relationship soured because he slept with his girlfriend at the time. But I just kind of was able to work with him a little bit on the performance. Like I was just saying, because he's got kids, I was like, it's the disappointment in your voice. It's like, you know, when your kids kind of disappoint you and you're trying not to show it, but
so
it still comes
on
out.
the heartstrings a bit.
Yeah, but he just was able to do it. You know, it's really good. So, and again, it's just like these guys are, you know, quite famous and do really well for themselves. So it's really nice to find people who are famous and still have, they're all about making stuff and creating and being creative, and they still have the humility. And that's like, you know, I think that's really important for me when I work with my crew and my cast. It's about people who want to make stuff and be creative, but also still have appreciate that you're in this great position to make things. And that's really
stay
important.
humble in a way. And
So,
Mariah Carey is the kind of polar opposite of that. Well, so my missus tells me.
Yeah, I think I've kind of like, even with the new film, we have a cast of a lot of people I've worked with for the last 5 years, and we'll go through a casting process for some of the people that we don't have cast yet. But I always try to work with people that are that have a humility and a humbleness, and that's really important, because I couldn't imagine like being on a set, and you know, maybe as my career progresses I might get where you're having like a head-to-head with someone like Christian Bale or Tom Hardy, where they're arguing on set and stuff like that. But I kind of feel like that all needs to be worked out before, and then it becomes about, if you're arguing on set, then it's about ego kind of thing. And I think I'd really struggle with, I don't like confrontation. I think a lot of people don't, but I just don't like it, particularly in that environment. Everyone's so vulnerable and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's really nice when you work with these actors, and they just even Nathaniel Parker, we worked on The Proxy, the first thing that Stuart and I did together. You know, and at the time he was on Merlin, you know, but he was just really great. Showed up for a couple of days, showed up with a bag of chocolates for the crew and stuff like that. We ran into him at a screening of another game. And again, he was like really nice and friendly. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, that's the thing.
Kind of leads me on to one of the questions we always ask is who's the most famous person you've ever met? You've probably been thinking about that when I've been asking.
So yeah, because obviously I've been listening to these. So obviously Warwick, but the one that was I didn't meet him directly, but William Shatner.
Oh, really?
Captain Kirk. So one of the series we did back in 2013, we had an animation channel that was funded by YouTube as well, and that was called Hoo Ha, which I think is still live on YouTube. And we did an animation called Twisted Fairy Tales. So we had these great writers write these kind of funny versions of Jack and the Beanstalk and Little Red Riding Hood. I think there was 6 of them, I think, and we had money, and there was a bit of money, and we're able to secure William Shatner to do the kind of narration of it. So we paid him X amount for like 2 hours of recording time. And so he was recording in LA and we were in London listening. So I was there there was a director producer on it, and then I had the oversee of this production.
So it's like a Skype call or something?
Yeah, more or less a Skype call, and he was recording and we were listening to him. So yeah, William Shatner. So I actually have it. I think I still have it on my phone where I'm actually going like this, filming myself, so he can't see me. And I've actually written, "I'm talking to William Shatner right now."
Yeah.
And he was great. Like he's really funny. He was funny because like, you know, he's an older guy now, and he was really good in the beginning. But he's like also he didn't have any kind of tolerance, but he just kind of nailed it. And he had such a sense of humor as well too. Okay. But there was a moment when the director producer had to step out and they were doing something, and I was just having small talk with William Shatner because he's from Montreal, and I was actually born in Montreal, and I think he's still got family in Montreal. So he's a very I think there's one of the universities in Montreal, one of the student union buildings named after him, or unofficially. Wow. I think he went to McGill or Concordia, these 2 universities. But so I had this, over the Skype call with him, I was saying like, oh, I was born at St. Mary's Hospital, and he's like, oh yeah, okay, that's closed down. I said, this is where he grew up, and he's like, oh, I'm like, this is Captain Kirk, this is Captain Kirk. Like I'm a massive sci-fi fan, and there's always these debates amongst my friends back in the day of who's the better captain, Kirk or Picard, and I was always on Picard's side, but Captain Kirk, man, he was like, it's quite, and he's just a funny guy and stuff like that. So that's probably my most famous, and where I felt like, but I just had to pretend like I wasn't overwhelmed by it. There was a slight nervousness in my voice when I was just having the casual small talk with him and stuff.
Isn't he like a little bit of a loose cannon? Can I say that? Like I've just seen it like on Twitter or something like that. You can have some rants or something.
Yeah,
I guess everyone can, but
I mean, he's got to be in his 80s now.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, he's pretty old now. I think he's just prone. He can be quite funny on Twitter and stuff like that. Yeah. But I think he just doesn't give a shit anymore, really.
That's cool, yeah. Isn't Mark Hamill a bit like that? Isn't he a little bit like easier. I didn't. Again, Mr. Biffo had a tweet from us.
So, yeah, that's the
can't remember
reason
what
me
it
and
was
Mr. Biffo were joking about talc, and he just copies in Mark Hamill's Mark, do they have talcum powder in space? And he comes back and says, yeah. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah.
Mark Hamill's I think he's quite funny, isn't he? And he's quite political as well too, right? So
Yeah.
Which on Twitter can go many ways.
So, yes.
Do you ever get any sort of caught up any political stuff?
I never mention
hard.
anything political publicly at all.
Yeah, because once you start that,
Yeah. It doesn't do any good. It's not what I'm
we
here
have
for.
in the film we have our little it's a specific because I feel quite political how I feel about things, but again I don't really engage with it on social media because I just feel like it's just yelling at each other. Like I have some friends on Facebook who just argue with random people. I'm like, what's the point of this? There's no kind of engagement. There's no discourse around it.
Total waste of energy.
Yeah.
It's one of the bad points of social media. It gives anyone a voice. Anywhere, which obviously has a lot of good as well, but sometimes then people can build up this sort of momentum with other people that feel like-mindedness and just go for it and create a mountain out of a mouse hole.
Sure,
That's a hell of a way to create a mountain. Yeah.
Mouse hole.
I mean, we've talked about this social media. Like when we filmed, I'm doing this documentary series on like basically unconventional people and stories, and I've done one with Stuart, and we can hopefully film one with you soon about social media.
Guy, right?
Yeah, my friend Ian, who did a Monohan restaurant he has, and we talked about social media. You know, I've been in digital for 6 or 7 years, and I love it. I'm passionate about it, and you know, like the best and most fun stuff I've done has been on digital. But it's social media. It's like it's a double-edged sword, really. You know, it allows this great platform to discuss and talk. And I filmed this documentary in Kenya 9 years ago, and I'm still in touch with those people that I filmed with 9 years ago to see how they're doing, and that's really great. And it allows them this great resource and knowledge. But then, you know, I just see people just yelling at each other all the time, or, you know, espousing their political views to the same people over and over again. And I just I don't know what the echo chamber, that sort of thing. But yeah, and it's like, I think it allows, are we more polarized than we were 20 years ago? I don't know, but it's obviously more evident. You can see it. But we're so polarized, then how do you find that middle ground?
Yeah.
Because you're just going to stick with the people who are like me, and we're going to yell at each other. How do you find a middle ground? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's difficult.
It is scary. There is good and bad, isn't there? Social media. I think that's it. I mean, if it wasn't for social media, we probably wouldn't be sat here.
No, there's a good chance not. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we're similar in the effect that when something really upsets us politically or even personally, we end up making a film about it, really. It's more the sort of thing we do. It's where Another Game came from, was political stuff for me. You know, that's the way I can express that without getting shot down for not feeling the same as Billy from County Durham or whatever.
So you're a Trump supporter then?
Obviously, yeah. What's a funny thing is, like, obviously the script that we're working on now for the Polybius Heist, this original script was written 2 years ago. Like a long story, almost went into production about 2 years ago, and the financing
nearly
fell
3
through.
years ago now.
Have you had to make any tweaks as a result?
Yeah, well,
then?
we've gone back into the script, and it's really interesting to go back into a script 2 years later, or 2.5, 3 years later, because you evolve as a person, as a creative, as a filmmaker. And it's funny because I thought the script was further along. I thought at the time it was about 80% of the way, but reading it now, it's about 50% of the way. There's just stuff like particular character stuff, because there's so many different characters, like a lot of characters that start really strong and they fade away. I think the overall comedy and structure is still there, but you just change as a person, and there's not one Trump joke in there. There's not one single Trump joke in there, and there will be one Trump joke in there somewhere. Somewhere.
Let's keep it subtle.
Yeah, we can. But the first film has there's some political leanings in there.
Yeah,
but
few references
it's a
as well.
comedy as well too. So we don't want to take ourselves too seriously, but at the same time, I think for comedy, and like the way we're approaching this one, like we did the first one, I think it's like a comedy in the best sense. It's silly, but all the characters in the first film have a character arc, and there's a sort of an underpinning, and we do character profiles, and I think it's really important. And so these people, when you're writing up their character profiles with backstories, you give them political leanings and stuff like that, and it comes out and sort of stuff. But I think that's what makes good comedy good. It's like, it's funny. It can be like Naked Gun, which is just kind of silly.
I love Naked Gun.
Yeah, I love
so
Naked Gun.
much.
But we try to just approach it slightly different, so they're silly, but there's still like an underpinning there's an emotional underpinning of it all. So.
That sort of theme of the Naked Gun films, I think they tried to replicate that with maybe Hot Shots.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
the same
so
kind of time. Yeah.
Was that the Zucker brothers as well, or just
I don't
pretend
remember
Zucker
actually.
brothers?
Yeah, I don't remember.
And there's, I guess Scary Movie tried to be like that, but that was just a lot more naff. They ended up doing like about 6 or 7 of those.
Yeah, but the
God,
first
it's a
Scary
lot of
Movie I
those.
thought was quite
Yeah,
funny.
it worked,
Yeah.
so maybe they should have
the
done-
parody. Yeah,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then anything that becomes a franchise, it's sort of like because even like the first of Police Academy was quite funny. I
Yeah.
remember that one.
I was so surprised going back and watching that again a few years ago how good it was. I think because all the awful sequels are just sort of congealed in my mind. I'd forgotten the first one is actually good.
It is, yeah.
And then the second one's like, oh. And then
Yeah,
the third one,
about
you're
the
like,
third one. But then it becomes about the money, right? They know they have an
Yeah.
audience. They can get some writer who can write it in like 2 weeks
Yeah.
for
And
whatever.
the
and-
quality just eases down and down and down. Like American Pie did that as well.
Yeah.
Like, they had like so
God,
many
yeah.
spin-offs that went
Yeah.
straight to DVD.
Scary movies as well. There was disaster movie,
Yeah.
superhero
Yeah.
movie, fucking potato in a bowl movie.
I saw
you
the
know.
superhero one. That was horrendous.
Yeah.
So bad.
Oh, I don't know anyone who's actually seen it.
Oh,
It is as
yeah.
bad as
it
people
was,
say.
It was just so bad. I don't think I even finished. I didn't fall asleep. I just
Ryan has
Yeah,
raised his
right.
hand. Did you like it?
Let's move on.
it was awful.
But it's diminishing returns, really. I definitely have less kind of patience to commit to something because I think now because we have so much entertainment to consume, I just don't physically have the time. I have kids and I'm trying to do this and that. But you know, I don't know. It's like to commit to like it's rare that you see something like it's a trilogy now that I think, oh, you know, I enjoyed the first Avengers. I don't know, what are they on now? I'm like, yeah, okay, some superheroes run around. And I mean, it's pretty bad. I'm a big superhero guy. I grew up as a comic book kid, growing up as a DC comic book kid, Justice League and all that sort of stuff. But I'm just so bored of superhero films. I'm like, okay, yeah, they'll run around and jump, blah, blah, blah. But anything, it's really hard to it's rare that I see say like a trilogy, which is like the dream of a filmmaker to make a trilogy. So let's hope Ashens does well and we make the third one. But like, Star Wars, the original one, and Lord of the Rings. But since then, I remember seeing the second Matrix in the cinema, just being so disappointed.
Man, we went as
I
a
didn't-
group when we were working at PC World.
Didn't make it to the second one.
Yeah. You saw the first one, though?
Yeah, I saw the first. Yeah,
That's a good
And
place
did
to
you
stop.
stay awake?
I get kind of bored towards about 2/3 of the way in, and then I don't know. Was it an underwater bit or something where he's got something stuck to him? No?
Yeah, well,
am I thinking of the right film?
Yeah. Where he's in the
what?
pod.
Oh, he's
Remember
in the pod, that's-
Oh,
Yeah.
I started thinking of G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra. Then. I don't know where that's...
Yeah, I did like the fight scenes and that. I like when people push it like that.
It was
but
quite at the time. It was about 2000, was it?
1999.
1999. Yeah, at the time, all that
so that's
bullet
like
times.
20 years old now.
I
that
know,
time.
Yeah.
but that's the thing is like as we're getting older, all of a sudden stuff that are references, I'm like, oh, like
Yeah.
when I went to university or when I was in high school,
Yeah.
it's like, wow,
That was only
that's
5 years ago,
long
you know?
time ago. Like I know kids that are younger than that. I work with
Yeah.
21-year-olds and 22. Particularly if you work in digital, you often work with people who are like 21, 22, and there's a reference that and it's you base your life around this Indiana Jones quote, and they're like, Indiana who?
Yeah.
Like
A lot of people got some material from that Matrix thing, the whole when he goes back as well, avoiding the bullet.
Oh,
so
man,
many
yes,
films
the
have
bullet
spun that
dodge,
off.
yeah.
But would they get in trouble for ripping that off? Is there laws with that? Like
No,
you
I
guys
don't
did the
think
Indiana Jones thing?
If you're doing your own staging of it, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, so you guys didn't need
There's
permission for the
limits
Indiana
to
Jones.
it. Like
thing.
we couldn't just remake the entire Matrix and sell it for money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
word for word, like
Yeah.
or Indian Superman or whatever it was, the Bollywood one.
Oh my god.
Yeah, there are rules around it. I think it's like I don't know exactly. We'll maybe get someone in the comments to say about the legality of it, because we had to get advice when we released the first film. It was supposed to be just an online feature film, and you kind of like, the rules around it. We were a bit loose and goose. So there's like songs we sung on it and blah blah blah. But then when we got the DVD Blu-ray release, we had to actually get a proper check. I think it's called a neg check or something, where they check. It's like you need to get this checked and this checked, and basically there's a little song that the Night and Decoy character sings. We had to cut it out basically, or cut out part of it. We had to check the Stormtrooper thing. There was what was the game we played? Space Attack. Again, they had to do a poll. They had to do not necessarily showing the game is fine, the game that we played, but the photograph on the box. So they actually had to do the whole research going back to but basically the company is out of, and the thing is then if the person does make a claim, you basically have to pay them like a license fee for it.
Okay.
But you do your due diligence on it.
That was incredible.
but I
Space Attack. They had to go so far back. No, that company was sold to that one, and they went to like a certain depth back and just went, this is now actually so convoluted that we'll be
it's
fine.
like some Dutch holding company and bought this, and then so there was something about like if you're doing something that can like you're doing a version of something and people can confuse it for the original, so that could somehow impact them making money. That's I think it's one of the tests that they do for that. So it's not like someone's going to watch our film and confuse that with Indiana Jones, right? That kind of thing. So the Stormtroopers one was quite interesting.
I was going to ask about that. Like, to
So-
have a physical. That a stormtrooper's a stormtrooper, right?
Yeah.
like
So
this is-
interestingly
it's
not
enough,
put a wig on it, right?
if we had done our own version of a Stormtrooper outfit, that's a copyright infringement. But because we used original ones that were bought legally, and then there was actually a court case that Lucas was suing the guy who made, or Lucasfilms was suing the guy who had who made the first ones and had the original molds. So he's saying basically that's Lucasfilms, but there's a whole thing, you look it up on the internet. Basically, the court found in favor of the guy who made the molds and stuff like
Really?
that. So basically, the copyright was that we weren't infringing copyright, we were showing it, and that was completely okay based on this case. I can't remember all the details of it, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff you learn as you go along.
Didn't
right?
that end up where it could be different if the film's released in America, though?
No.
Wasn't that, oh, no, it's fine.
It was all
worldwide.
fine. Yeah.
Because it's on the internet, though. Isn't that technically released in America?
Yeah, it's a worldwide release, right?
Should we change the subject? It's all good.
Yeah, such an odd thing that you could do that because of this court case. The guys who made who have the molds sent me a full
Oh, the one you've
Stormtrooper
got.
armor. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's
After
cool.
that,
It's quite heavy,
yeah.
isn't it?
It's not too bad. It's impossible to walk in, and
right.
you literally. Well, it's not impossible to walk. It's impossible to sit down in. Literally,
It's just really warm, is it? Yeah.
Again, it's just more awkward, and it really hurts because it keeps jabbing you in all the places and that. You know.
Jamie Oliver once walked his kids to school in a Stormtrooper outfit, didn't he? Did you see that? And he's now been given a cameo potentially in a new one that they're making, the next one.
As a stormtrooper.
As a stormtrooper?
Probably, yeah. I think it was in the paper, but yeah, he had a picture of him going to walk his kids to school. He's a massive Star Wars nut. So,
Is he?
Yeah,
Jamie
yeah.
Oliver is.
Yeah, really into it. Yeah. So.
Ooh, but I have to
Just
get
like
him on at
Barry,
some
like
point.
Barry's.
Oh yeah,
Star
you
Wars
can see
fan.
the links.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, he'd be the dream guest, wouldn't he? Jamie Oliver in his Stormtrooper outfit. Like, it's Jamie Oliver. No one will know. He'd be like at the end, it's like Eli or Warwick Davis. There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a smaller stormtrooper.
Yeah, that's right. What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you? You must have been thinking of some
I've been
corkers.
thinking about this. So it's funny because I'm naturally, like when I was a kid growing up, I was quite shy. I'm quite shy, and I'm quite a shy person naturally, which is kind of funny. I've ended up being a director and you're in the middle of everything. So I think I avoid embarrassing situations. I can't think of anything. There's obvious things. Like I remember back in the day writing some letters to some girls and some women at the time that you did back in the day that I cringe to think. I'm sure they're in a bin a long time ago, but I cringe
That's
to
what
think.
you thought, Riyad.
Yeah. Someone is like, oh, it'll be someone like in the comments just being
She's
like,
here
Riyad said
today.
this.
Yeah.
But, it's young love and all that sort of stuff. And but yeah, God, I can imagine like now you it'll be there on your Twitter feed forever, right? Or whatever, right?
God, on
But
Facebook.
It's just kind of funny thing about hair, like about kids when you're a teenager and hair. So when I was a teenager, I was a skateboarder, or I was a really terrible skateboarder, right?
Yeah.
And back in Canada anyway, it was like cool to have like long hair in the front, so you
Right.
could skate and you could like flip your hair up.
Hey,
as
you should be
doing-
hanging out with Matt Riley.
yeah, Matt's story sort of inspired me. So, but my hair's quite thick, right? So I can't really grow my hair. It just starts going a bit bouffant, kind of thing. It doesn't really move, right? Like I'll be in a windstorm and my hair doesn't move at all. But I used to try to grow my hair long, but I have a natural curl in there. So I used to in the mornings with my mum's curling iron. Curl it down straight so it would kind of go there and try to be down, but by the end of the day it would be like this. So I remember coming
Something
home,
about
my
Mary.
hair is kind of like this, and I'm like all day trying to put some water on, but it just makes it worse. So I just remember coming home like that. Yeah, that's quite just like those embarrassing scenarios, which is now it's like when you're teenagers you can laugh about it
you
sort of
can,
thing.
yeah.
But
It's
at
one
the
of those-
time I think and I look at the photographs of me, like the school
Oh, you
photograph.
had school photo with that?
Where I think I probably thought it in the morning it was like that, so I could do kind of a cool pose. But by the end
It
it's
reached like 90 degrees.
90 degrees kind of thing. Yeah.
Can
So
we
is
have
it-
somebody with that haircut in Polybius
Yeah, that would be
somewhere?
quite funny.
Oh,
There's
you've
supposed to be an 80s flashback, right? There's 80s
Yeah.
flashback, so I can speak to our makeup and hair and makeup person to say, here's a photograph of me. Can you replicate this hair?
Yeah, like a little Easter egg in the film. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah. We love our Easter eggs in films as well too.
Oh,
so yeah.
man.
Have you
Yeah.
got some ones in the first Gamechild film that people haven't spotted?
There's a lot of sad onions hidden. I don't think
Is
I've
there?
found them all yet.
There was 3.
I watched the film
sad
4
onions.
times the last
Really?
month alone.
Yeah, that we-
testing a DVD, not just
Yeah.
like
Just
This
watching
guy.
myself. This guy's amazing. there's lots of little references that are maybe, and probably Stuart has some and I have some in there that maybe like my brothers will watch the film and they'll know. Like I used to love Adam Sandler films back in the day, the original ones, you know, Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore. Just I love that kind of, and I think it comes in the film a little bit. Like it's just these surreal kind of comedy moments where, you know, there's Tom Webster, the character in the bus who like leans in. It's completely random. Like that's kind of inspired by. There's a lot of like little tiny references in there, but maybe it's just like a line. It's like a tiny little line that only maybe I know, my brother might know, kind of thing.
Okay.
There's lots of stuff like that. Like I think if we were to sit down and do a full list, and as I said, we purposefully did that for this film. You don't normally do that, but it's just quite fun. And again, if you can do it so no one even knows about it. And I always like this story I always roll out. I sent the film to this company Channel Flip used to owned by Shine, and they own Kudos, who do Peaky Blinders. And I'd met someone at one of these work things, and I told her about the film, and she's like, "Oh, you know, did you release it as like a 10-part series because you can't release a feature film on YouTube?" I was like, "No, we did it as a proper feature film." She's like, "Oh, okay," and just sort of, "Yeah, sure." And she said, "Well, send it to me," and I did. And I didn't expect to hear from her, and then like 2 months later, she emailed back and said, "I'm so sorry it's taking so long, but like this is just a really charming and entertaining film. I laughed all the way through." I said, "I don't know any of the references. I don't know who these guys are. I don't know." And she said, "But it's just like a really entertaining film." That was like kind of I don't think you need the validation, but it's really nice that you made a film that people appreciate. But again, all the references, like the Matrix Spoon Boy reference, she wouldn't have got, but it stood on its own. It's just like this. It's just basically that's a weird guy. It stands as a weird guy at the bar, right? Even though
Which is the core of the joke.
Yeah, it's the core of the joke, right?
It's a reference there if you get it, but as you said earlier, they have to stand on their own two legs, don't they? If not, you've just got some lazy garbage like the later Shrek films, where it's just like, here's something from real life, but we have put it into this fantasy kingdom. That is the joke.
Yeah.
Right.
I hate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever been in a local newspaper?
Let's think.
I was just wondering if in Canada, if that's the same level, if you have like, I'm trying to like, obviously we have
not really, not to the same, like these kind of quite niche kind of like
local teenager has sundial haircut.
man buys new fridge.
No, I used to play a lot of sports, probably till I basically had kids and stuff like that. So I did appear in I played American football for like 5 years, and there's like a couple really cool photographs of me like tackling someone, and you can through the helmet you can see my nose. I'm quite a distinct nose, so people can see that. So I think like sort of sporty things, but we don't kind of quite have that culture of like these little, maybe in town, because I always grew up in cities. I grew up in Toronto, and we were in Montreal, and so they didn't have like that little small, that kind of culture of it so much. So yeah, nothing as interesting as some of the other stories I've heard. So
right, yeah. There's some pretty interesting. I'm trying to think of my favorite one so far. Matt's was pretty interesting.
Yes, starting his own bizarre
charity
concert.
Concert. We made a tenor.
Yeah, which I think everyone's their own article in their own way, but I quite liked that one.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
So we did Dear Barshens.
Dear Barshens, yes.
This is from Paul in Silicon Valley. Is that a valley made of silicon?
Yes.
Yes. That's like in America, that's where all the money is, isn't it?
That's all the tech companies.
So,
all the tech companies in Silicon Valley.
And,
It's the sand and the chips, the silicon that goes into the chips and all that stuff.
He could be a robot or something.
Yeah, let's pretend he's a robot.
With a generic British accent, let's say.
Hello.
Do you have any dream guests for the Barshens podcast? I listen to Rooster Teeth, for example. And how does it work for you when you want to happen? Do you have a secret way of setting that up? Is there a secret club?
Yeah, just ask.
Please come on. I don't know. It's hard to say dream guest because never meet your heroes. They'll always disappoint you.
Is that a phrase? Is it?
Yeah. Because often you meet people. I mean, as I said, we've talked about a couple of people and they've been great, but sometimes you meet people and then they're... I remember watching this documentary about Rush. Remember the band Rush? There was a metal... They're a Canadian metal band that were quite influential. I think in their 70s they were quite huge. And then there was this drummer, I think his name is Neil Peart, I think, and he's apparently he's known for being quite difficult. And they were interviewing all these guys from Rage Against the Machine, and a couple of them had the stories of like, oh, I met Neil and he basically ignored me and treated me really badly, but that's the way it goes, kind of thing. And I feel you should consider, because these were kids who are like, I'm gonna meet him, and it's just like, oh yeah. So I think that sometimes people are just just don't live up to what you'd hope they would.
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely. No, I don't know. There's not some secret way of sorting out a collaboration, is it?
No, you get in touch with agent, or
Yeah.
if they're
Tweet them or
promoting
something.
press agent, or the way we've done it so far is some sort of wheedle our way in through some sort
Yeah.
of having met some
Friend of a friend. I mean,
Donald Trump might be interesting to have.
Yeah, sure.
Vladimir
Yeah.
Putin.
yeah. Who would be your like?
just the small names.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe not a dream guest, but is there anyone like obviously being here? You've seen most of them so far. Like, is there a person that you'd like to see sat there in general? Just okay, I would really like to have Louis Theroux sat there.
Yeah.
I think
so,
that's someone that it's probably very hard to get hold of.
Yeah,
but
that's a hard one.
like we were talking about him earlier. I think he would end up questioning us.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, or just leave long silences so you can hang yourself
Yeah.
in them. Yeah.
I actually, back in the day, I used to live down in New Cross, which is in South London, and there was a gym there with, I think it's Goldsmith University, and I used to go work out at the gym there, and he was there. He used to work out there. I think it was because he used to be quite skinny, and now he's quite healthy. He got quite sort of buff. I think he got into it, but I always was like, should I go talk to him? Like, no, I'll just leave him, because I'll see things, because I saw Daniel Day-Lewis.
Really?
I was doing some work down at one of the squares down by Warren Street. There's a square that looks very Regency period kind of thing, and he was speaking, and he was there on the park bench speaking to another actress, and I was just like, oh my god, it's Daniel Day-Lewis, but I just sort of walked by. I always feel like I want to leave people alone, right?
It's
So
tricky.
so if you guys get Daniel Day-Lewis,
How would we know it's him though?
Yeah.
He's going to be in character as anyone.
Would we have to
Perhaps
just
he's
tweet him?
this.
yeah,
This is
I'm sure. Yeah, imagine he's he's really active on Twitter. he's
but always in character.
He's always doing Instagram stories,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
selfies.
Yeah.
And Daniel Day-Lewis is always doing
on the
selfies.
set of Phantom Thread.
Daniel Day-Lewis is known for his duck face.
Which he has.
Hashtag
He
filming
went and
again.
lived with ducks for 5 years to learn the duck face properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, every movie he's on
God.
runs over because he's too busy doing his stories and stuff.
I'm trying to think of a way into Louis Theroux. Adam Buxton lives just outside Norwich.
Right?
Does a podcast.
Was he on that?
He went to school with Louis Theroux. He's big mates with Louis
Oh, really?
Theroux.
Do you know Adam Buxton then?
No, I don't know really. He
That might rule
subscribed to
out
my
the-
channel in the very early days when you could still see a list of people who subscribed to you.
Oh, wow,
So that
that
was
was
a while
old.
ago.
Yeah.
But I got no real in with him. If we get big enough numbers, maybe we could
Yeah.
Tweet or something.
move
like
things
that.
in that direction.
But I think it's nice. This obviously the new podcast and everything. I think I love the idea of you guys just having different people on here. So maybe some people that you can know, but other people, because I think that's what's really this thing I was doing with my documentary. There's like everyone's got a story. Most
Yeah.
people have. I've met some people that really bore me, but it's very
Yeah.
everyone's got a story. Right?
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that's
Barry.
fascinating. Present company included.
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it's just about. I love that idea of like just different people and their different
Yeah.
stories, a mixture of. I think that's there's real potential.
I want
in
to get
that.
Simon Pegg on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Can I say? I'll say it. Isn't he a little bit prickly, or is he?
I genuinely don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe not.
I think in the nicest way he's probably gone Hollywood.
Okay.
In that sense that he's he's doing Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise. He's writing Star Trek films, right?
Do I do
He's-
Barshens
yes.
or?
yeah. Do
I was going to say, is he writing the 4th Star Trek film? But apparently that's just been cancelled.
Oh really? Oh, that's surprising.
So he's been writing a different film instead.
Yes. Yeah.
Was he
but-
Scotty in that?
Yes, he
I
was.
thought I saw a little clip of it. That was filmed Hot Fuzz near me, and in Somerset, the actual village where all the scenes were shot around there. So I saw them for a while, just like filming it. And what's his name? The other guy,
Nick Frost.
Frost. Yeah, he might be
Yeah.
a bit more accessible. You never know.
He's still doing stuff. Hot Fuzz was a bit of or Shaun of the Dead was a bit of a reference for Gamechild
Yeah.
as well, to that kind of humor, I think, because it's interesting. Like the humor between us, because Stuart's got a very British sense of humor, and I have a very kind of Canadian sense of humor as well too. So somewhere we meet in the middle, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that works. There's a slight cynicism into Canadian humor,
Yeah,
but there's
I think
also
that's
that kind
how
of
we mesh.
yeah.
in that,
But it's also
on
that
point.
slightly American. I always love the fact in Gamechild that I got the cheesy American high school ending with
Yeah.
like a dance scene.
Right,
like
right,
I can't believe I got away with it with a Stuart Ashen film. I got away with the cheesy dance ending.
But it just fit.
Yeah, but it's setting it up because I love those films where they always end up with the dance routine.
Yeah.
Like I have like this my secret thing. I love like American high school
Yeah, that's
films.
right.
Kind
Yeah,
of
add
thing.
a little twist to that.
Yeah, add
Yeah.
a little twist to that. But yeah, I think the humor kind of it meshes that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything you'd like to promote while you're here? Like, obviously, you talked about.
No,
your,
I'm not doing anything. I'm
your
not
little-
doing anything at all. No, I mean, obviously, Ashens and
Anything for
Polybius
sell on
Heist.
eBay? Or just,
Yeah, I did.
Check
some
out
old toys.
Riyad's watercolors.
Yeah.
was it Bob Ross? Is that the guy, the
Bob
painting
Ross,
guy?
yeah.
You should start a channel where you're like just painting.
No, so Ashens and Polybius Heist, we're deep into pre-production, hopefully
Hmm.
shooting. I mean, we're filming now in January. Hopefully we'll be filming in April, but there's a lot of work to do. A lot of Stuart and I are really doing another deep dive on the scripts. The other thing is that documentary series I'm doing Unconventional. I've filmed 3 more and hopefully going to get those out soon.
So is that on your own channel?
That was on my
Yeah.
own thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to just build something, and a wonderful editor Linton's working on it. It's just trying to find time because I basically am funding that myself kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
How-
those are the main
How do they
two
find
things.
that? If anyone wants to find it, or do you want people to find it?
Yeah, so that's my YouTube channel, which is probably just Riyad Barmania kind
Okay,
of thing.
and it will
I
just
think.
pop up.
It'll pop up. I think
Yeah.
it's the one there. But yeah, I mean, I have a YouTube channel that's got a lot of stuff that I've done previously, just to see what I've done. But we've done I've done a lot of stuff together.
Yeah.
Go back and watch the proxy, the extended cut
Yeah,
on
oh my
Stuart's
God.
channel.
I haven't
Yeah.
seen that. I haven't seen the procs. I've seen Gamechild like 4 times. Actually,
I like.
we
Did
were
you
Bristol.
stay awake? Did
Yeah,
you stay
yeah,
awake
yeah.
4 times?
Have you seen
yeah?
it 4 times?
I have, yeah.
Amazing. Really?
But I've seen it. The first time I saw it was when we were in Bristol.
the Odeon in
Were you
Bristol.
there?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, we did the Q&A.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. And there was
Dan.
Dan was there as well. But I think I was sat next to some other YouTubers, possibly. I don't know if there was anyone else. I remember.
Dick Brain was there. Dan and Ollie
Yeah.
Potlin was there as well.
With
too.
some PR guys, not for the film, just people
Yeah.
I knew who live in Bristol.
Yeah. Was you be doing like a premiere or anything like that for the second one? Or,
Absolutely, yeah. We'll do. I mean, there's a whole thing now how we're going
Yeah,
to get it
you're
out
not
and
coming.
market.
are we?
No.
We're just putting
You're
that out there.
gonna be in the
It's
film.
not a
If you
film,
need
but you're
any
the only
catering.
person not
Yes.
invited. Yeah.
Hopefully
So I
I
have
have
some new
a.
ideas about your character. Ben.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh no! Based on my
Naked.
I'm the naked chef. Are you thinking like brilliant?
No, I'm
Yeah.
thinking a mixture of like a chef thing and an odd job thing. So there's a bit of
Yeah.
a bit of a henchman guard
Random
thing going
task
on.
from
Yeah,
Austin
random
Powers.
task,
Yeah.
something like that.
Random recipe.
As long as I get to wear a suit, I don't mind. That'd be
Yeah.
cool. Like a sieve instead of a hat. A bowler hat. Like that. There we go.
Oh, it's grazed me.
Yeah, it's just grated me. Yeah, grater. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Guys.
Thanks,
That was
Riyad.
fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on.
I'll get behind the camera now.
Yes. back to the dark place.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Barshens.
It just makes you want to do that, doesn't it?
Yes. Good old Dan Williams.